The sun had been merciless for 3 days straight, and Zara Mitchell knew with absolute certainty that if she did not find water within the next few hours, both she and her mare would die in this God-forsaken stretch of Arizona desert. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, her tongue felt like leather in her mouth, and every breath she drew seemed to scrape her throat raw. The year was 1883, and she had been foolish enough to believe she could make the journey from Tombstone to Douglas on her own, carrying nothing but stubborn pride and a half-full canteen that had run dry yesterday afternoon. Her mare, a beautiful chestnut named Rosie, stumbled again, and Zara felt tears prick her eyes even though her body had no moisture left to spare for crying. She slid from the saddle, her boots hitting the hard, packed earth with a soft thud. Rosie's sides were heaving, her head hanging low, and Zara could see the desperation in those large, dark eyes. With trembling hands, Zara pulled out her canteen and unscrewed the cap. She tilted it over her cupped palm, and 3 precious drops fell into her hand. 3 drops. That was all that remained. "I am so sorry, girl," Zara whispered, her voice barely more than a croak. She held her palm up to Rosie's muzzle, and the mare's rough tongue lapped at the moisture desperately. "I am so sorry." Zara sank to her knees in the red dirt, the weight of her mistake crushing down on her shoulders. She had left Tombstone in anger, fleeing from her uncle's house after another argument about her future, about marriage, about becoming a proper lady instead of the wild thing she had always been. Her parents had died 2 years ago in a typhoid outbreak, and she had been sent to live with her mother's brother, a stern man who viewed her independence as a character flaw that needed correcting. She had thought she could make it to Douglas, where her father's old friend ran a boarding house. She had thought wrong. The sun beat down on her bare head. Her hat had blown away sometime yesterday, carried off by a hot wind that offered no relief. Zara closed her eyes and tried to pray, but the words would not come. She was 22 years old, and she was going to die out here because of her own stubborn pride. That was when she heard it. The soft creak of leather, the steady clip-clop of hooves on hard ground. Zara's eyes flew open, and she squinted against the brutal glare of the sun. A dark shape materialized out of the shimmering heat waves, resolving itself into a man on horseback. He sat tall in the saddle, a brown hat shading his face, and as he drew closer, Zara could make out more details. Broad shoulders, a dark shirt, chaps covering long legs, and a pair of saddlebags that looked reassuringly full. He reined in his horse about 10 feet away, and for a long moment he simply looked at her. Zara tried to stand, but her legs would not cooperate. She remained on her knees, one hand resting on Rosie's neck, acutely aware of how she must look. Filthy, sunburned, desperate. "You look like you could use some help, miss," the man said, and his voice was deep and rough like gravel underfoot. He swung down from his horse with practiced ease and walked toward her, pulling a canteen from his belt as he moved. "When did you last have water?" "Yesterday," Zara managed to say, and the word came out as barely more than a whisper. The cowboy dropped to one knee in front of her and uncapped his canteen. "Drink slow," he instructed, holding it to her lips. "I know you want to gulp it down, but you will make yourself sick." The water touched her lips, and Zara had to fight every instinct in her body to obey his instruction. She took small sips, letting the blessed coolness trickle down her throat. After a few swallows, he pulled the canteen away. "Your horse, too?" he asked, glancing at Rosie. Zara nodded, and the cowboy stood. He poured water into his hat, a well-worn thing that looked like it had seen better days, and held it up to Rosie's muzzle. The mare drank gratefully, and Zara watched as the cowboy stroked her neck, murmuring soft words of comfort. "She is a beauty," he said, glancing back at Zara. "Good lines." You have taken good care of her, up until this foolishness anyway." There was no judgment in his tone, just a statement of fact, and somehow that made it easier to bear. Zara took the opportunity to really look at him. He was young, perhaps 26 or 27, with dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck beneath his hat. His face was tanned and weathered from years in the sun, with strong features and a jaw that looked like it had been carved from granite. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. They were a pale gray like storm clouds, and they held a gentleness that seemed at odds with his rugged appearance. "Can you stand?" he asked, offering her his hand. Zara placed her hand in his, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. He pulled her to her feet and she swayed slightly. His other hand came up to steady her, gripping her elbow. "Easy now," he said. "Let me guess, you were trying to make it to Douglas. How did you know?" Zara asked, finding her voice growing stronger now that the water was beginning to work its magic. "Because there is nothing else out this way worth dying for," he replied. He guided her to a large rock and helped her sit down, then offered her the canteen again. "I am Wade Dockery. I run cattle between here and New Mexico." "Zara Mitchell," she replied, taking another careful sip of water. "And yes, I was trying to reach Douglas. I have a friend there." "You were cutting across the desert alone?" Wade asked, and now there was a note of incredulity in his voice. "Miss Mitchell, that is about the most dangerous thing a person can do out here. Even experienced travelers do not attempt this stretch without proper supplies and preferably company." "I know that now," Zara said, feeling her cheeks flush with embarrassment beneath the sunburn. "I was not thinking clearly when I left Tombstone." Wade studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Well, what is done is done. Douglas is still a good 6 hours' ride from here, and that is if we do not stop. Your mare needs rest, and so do you. There is a way station about 2 hours northeast. We can make it there before dark, spend the night, and then head to Douglas in the morning." "I cannot pay you," Zara said quickly. "I have a little money, but not much." "Did I ask for payment?" Wade replied, one eyebrow lifting slightly. "You needed help. I am providing it." "That is just being decent." He walked back to his own horse, a sturdy bay gelding, and retrieved a piece of jerky from his saddlebag. He brought it back to Zara and pressed it into her hand. "Eat this, slowly. Your stomach will not be happy with you if you rush." As Zara ate, Wade saw to the horses. He poured more water for Rosie and his own mount, then checked both animals for any signs of distress. His movements were efficient and practiced, the movements of a man who had spent his entire life working with horses and living off the land. "Can I ask what drove you to such a desperate act?" Wade asked as he worked. "Forgive me for being blunt, but a woman of your bearing does not usually end up dying of thirst in the Arizona desert without a good reason." Zara hesitated. She did not know this man, but he had saved her life. She owed him at least some explanation. "I was living with my uncle in Tombstone after my parents passed. He wanted me to marry a friend of his, a man twice my age who already buried 2 wives. I refused, we argued, and I left. I thought I could make it to Douglas on my own." Wade was quiet for a moment, his hands stilling on the saddle he was adjusting. "That took courage," he finally said. "Foolish courage maybe, but courage nonetheless." "Courage or stupidity?" Zara asked bitterly. "Sometimes they are the same thing," Wade replied. He finished with the saddles and came back to her. "Can you ride? I can put you on my horse and pony your mare if you are too weak." "I can ride," Zara said, standing up. Her legs were shaky but functional. "Thank you for everything." Wade nodded and helped her back into Rosie's saddle. The mare seemed revived by the water and ready to move. Wade mounted his own horse with a fluid motion and turned the gelding northeast. "Stay close to me," he said. "And if you start feeling faint, you tell me right away." I do not need you falling off your horse and breaking your neck after I went to all this trouble to keep you alive." Despite everything, Zara felt a smile tug at her cracked lips. "Yes, sir." They rode in silence for the first hour, the landscape stretching out around them in shades of red and gold and brown. The desert was beautiful in its own harsh way, Zara thought, with its twisted Joshua trees and resilient cacti. But it was also unforgiving, and she had learned that lesson the hard way. As they rode, Zara found herself studying Wade from the corner of her eye. He sat his horse like he had been born in the saddle, his body moving with the animal's rhythm in perfect synchronization. There was something solid about him, something dependable, and Zara realized that she had not felt safe in a very long time. Not since her father died, but riding beside this stranger across the desert, she felt safe. "Have you been a cattleman long?" she asked, breaking the silence. "All my life," Wade replied. "My father had a small ranch in New Mexico. He taught me everything he knew before he passed 5 years ago. Now I work for the Double Bar Ranch, moving cattle between Arizona and New Mexico, keeping an eye on the herds, that sort of thing." "Is it a good life?" Zara asked. Wade considered the question. "It is a hard life. Long days, longer nights, and the pay is not much to speak of. But it is honest work, and I get to spend my days under the open sky instead of trapped in some town. For me, that is enough." "I understand that," Zara said softly. "My uncle wanted me to learn to be a proper lady. He wanted me to stay indoors, practice needlepoint, and simper at prospective husbands. I felt like I was suffocating." "What did you do before you went to live with him?" Wade asked. "My father owned a small ranch outside Tucson," Zara said, and she felt warmth spread through her chest at the memory. "It was not much, but it was ours. My mother died when I was 15, and after that it was just Papa and me. He taught me to ride, to rope cattle, to shoot. He treated me like the son he never had." "He sounds like a good man," Wade said. "He was the best," Zara replied, her throat tightening. "He got sick 2 years ago, typhoid. He fought it for 3 weeks, but in the end it took him. The ranch had to be sold to pay his debts, and I had nowhere to go except to my uncle." "I am sorry," Wade said, and the simple sincerity in his voice made Zara's eyes burn with unshed tears. "Thank you," she whispered. They rode on, and as the afternoon wore into evening, Zara found herself relaxing in Wade's presence. He pointed out landmarks, told her stories about his work, and even made her laugh once or twice with a dry observation about a particularly stubborn bull he had dealt with the previous month. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, a small structure appeared in the distance. It was little more than a shack with a corral attached, but to Zara, it looked like paradise. "That is the way station," Wade said. "The man who runs it is named Hector Gomez. He is a good sort, keeps supplies for travelers, and will not ask too many questions." They rode up to the way station as the last light was fading from the sky. A stocky man with a thick mustache and kind eyes emerged from the shack, wiping his hands on his trousers. "Wade Dockery," he said, his face breaking into a smile. "It has been some time, my friend." "Good to see you, Hector," Wade replied, dismounting. "I have a situation here. This is Miss Zara Mitchell. She ran into some trouble in the desert, and we need a place to rest for the night." Hector's eyes flicked to Zara, taking in her sunburned face and obvious exhaustion, and his expression softened. Of course. Bring the horses to the corral, and I will prepare some food. You both look like you could use a hot meal." Wade helped Zara down from her saddle, his hands gentle but firm on her waist, and she found herself leaning against him for just a moment, drawing strength from his solid presence. Then she straightened and forced herself to stand on her own 2 feet. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You do not need to keep thanking me," Wade replied, but there was no irritation in his voice. "Come on, let us get you inside." The interior of the way station was sparse but clean, with a large table dominating the center of the single room and a fireplace crackling with warmth. Hector bustled around, preparing a simple meal of beans, tortillas, and coffee while Wade saw to the horses. Zara sank into a chair and let her head fall back against the wall. Every muscle in her body ached, and her skin felt tight and hot from the sun exposure. But she was alive, and that was more than she had expected a few hours ago. Wade returned and took the seat across from her. In the firelight, his features seemed softer, and Zara noticed the fine lines around his eyes, the fullness of his mouth, the way his hair fell across his forehead. He was handsome, she realized, in a rough, unpolished way. "Here we are," Hector said, setting plates of food in front of them. "Eat, eat. You need your strength." The food was simple but delicious, and Zara ate slowly, savoring every bite. Wade ate with the same steady efficiency he brought to everything else, and she found herself watching the way his hands moved, the way his jaw worked as he chewed. "So, Miss Mitchell," Hector said, settling into a chair with his own plate. "What brings you to our little corner of the world?" Zara glanced at Wade, who gave a slight nod of encouragement. "I am trying to reach Douglas. I have a friend there who can help me start over." "And your family?" Hector asked gently. "All gone," Zara replied. "It is just me now." Hector nodded, his eyes sympathetic. "I understand. I lost my own family many years ago. It is not easy to rebuild a life after such loss, but it can be done with patience and good friends." After they finished eating, Hector showed Zara to a small room at the back of the way station. There was a narrow bed, a wash basin, and a small mirror on the wall. It was not much, but it was more than she had hoped for. "I will leave you to rest," Hector said. "If you need anything, just call out." Zara washed her face and hands, wincing at the sting of water on her sunburned skin, then collapsed onto the bed. Sleep claimed her almost instantly, and she dreamed of water, of rain falling from the sky, of cool rivers flowing through green valleys. She woke once in the night to the sound of voices. Through the thin wall, she could hear Wade and Hector talking in low tones. "She is lucky you found her," Hector was saying. "Another few hours and she would have been beyond help." "I know," Wade replied. "She is tougher than she looks, though. Not many people could survive what she went through." "What will you do now?" Hector asked. "Take her to Douglas as promised," Wade said. "Make sure she gets to her friends safely. After that, I need to get back to the ranch. I have been away longer than I intended." "You could stay a few extra days," Hector said, and there was something sly in his tone. "She is a beautiful woman, Wade, and you have been alone for a long time." "That is not why I am helping her," Wade said firmly. "She needed help and I provided it, nothing more." But as Zara drifted back to sleep, she found herself wondering if that was entirely true. She had seen the way Wade looked at her when he thought she was not paying attention. She had felt the gentleness in his touch, the concern in his eyes. And she could not deny that she felt drawn to him in a way she had never experienced before. Morning came too quickly. Zara woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon, and her stomach growled immediately. She dressed in her dirty clothes, grimacing at the state of them, and made her way out to the main room. Wade was already up, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee in his hands. He looked up as she entered, and a slow smile spread across his face. "Good morning. You look better. How do you feel?" "Sore," Zara admitted, "but alive. Thanks to you." Hector brought her a plate of breakfast and a cup of coffee, and she ate gratefully. As they finished their meal, Wade stood and stretched, his shirt pulling tight across his broad shoulders. "We should get moving if we want to make Douglas by afternoon," he said. "Hector, thank you for your hospitality." "Any time, my friend," Hector replied. He turned to Zara and took her hand. "Safe travels, Miss Mitchell. May you find what you are looking for in Douglas." They rode out as the sun was climbing in the eastern sky, the morning air still cool and pleasant. Rosie seemed much recovered, her step lively, and Zara felt immeasurably better than she had the previous day. "Tell me about this friend of yours in Douglas," Wade said as they rode. "What is her name?" "Margaret Thompson," Zara replied. "She and my mother were close friends when they were young. After Mama died, Mrs. Thompson kept in touch with letters. She runs a boarding house in Douglas and told me I would always be welcome there." "And what will you do once you arrive?" Wade asked. Zara hesitated. "I am not entirely sure. Find work, I suppose. Mrs. Thompson mentioned that she could always use help at the boarding house. It is not what I dreamed of, but it is better than marrying a man I do not love." "What did you dream of?" Wade asked, and there was genuine curiosity in his voice. Zara looked out across the landscape, considering. "I dreamed of having my own ranch again someday. A small place, nothing grand but mine. A place where I could raise horses, maybe some cattle. I am good with animals, always have been. Papa said I had a gift." "That is a fine dream," Wade said quietly, "and not impossible if you are willing to work for it." "Do you think so?" Zara asked, turning to look at him. "Everyone always told me I was being foolish, that women cannot run ranches on their own." "I have known a few women ranchers in my time," Wade replied. "They were tough as nails, every one of them, but they made it work. If you have the determination and the knowledge, I do not see why you could not do the same." His words kindled a small flame of hope in Zara's chest. Maybe her dream was not as foolish as everyone had always told her. Maybe, with time and hard work, she could actually build the life she wanted. As they rode, the landscape began to change. The harsh desert gave way to scrubby grassland, and they passed occasional homesteads and ranches. They stopped once to water the horses at a small stream, and Wade shared more of his supplies with Zara, insisting she eat even though she protested that he was giving her too much. "I can always get more," he said. "Besides, you need your strength." By early afternoon, Douglas appeared on the horizon. It was larger than Zara had expected, a bustling town that sat near the border with Mexico. The streets were busy with people, and she could see shops, saloons, a church, and numerous houses spreading out in all directions. "Do you know where Mrs. Thompson's boarding house is located?" Wade asked. "She said it was on 3rd Street, near the church," Zara replied, her heart beginning to pound with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. They rode through the town, drawing a few curious glances from passers-by. Wade seemed oblivious to the attention, but Zara felt acutely aware of her disheveled appearance. When they finally found the boarding house, a neat white building with a wraparound porch and cheerful blue shutters, Zara felt a wave of relief wash over her. Wade dismounted and helped her down, and together they walked up to the front door. Zara knocked, and after a moment, the door swung open to reveal a plump woman in her 50s with graying blonde hair and warm brown eyes. "Can I help you?" the woman asked, her gaze moving from Wade to Zara and back again. "Mrs. Thompson," Zara said. "I am Zara Mitchell, Sarah Mitchell's daughter." The woman's eyes widened, and then her face broke into a huge smile. "Zara, oh my dear child." She pulled Zara into a tight embrace, and Zara felt tears spring to her eyes. "I was beginning to worry when I did not hear from you. Come in, come in." Wade hung back, his hat in his hands, and Mrs. Thompson noticed him for the first time. "And who is this young man?" "This is Wade Dockery," Zara said quickly. "He saved my life in the desert, Mrs. Thompson. If not for him, I would not be standing here." Mrs. Thompson's expression shifted to one of alarm. "In the desert? Good heavens, what happened? It is a long story, Zara said. But Mr. Dockery found me when I ran out of water. He shared his canteen with both me and my horse and brought me here safely. Mrs. Thompson turned to Wade and grasped his hand in both of hers. Then, I am forever in your debt, Mr. Dockery. Please, come inside. You must let me feed you properly to thank you for your kindness. That is not necessary, madam, Wade said, but Mrs. Thompson was already ushering them both inside. The boarding house was cozy and welcoming, with comfortable furniture and the smell of fresh baked bread in the air. Mrs. Thompson sat them down in the parlor and disappeared into the kitchen, returning moments later with lemonade and cookies. Now, tell me everything, she said, settling into a chair across from them. Zara told the story, with Wade occasionally adding details she missed. Mrs. Thompson listened with increasing distress, her hand pressed to her chest. "Oh, Zara, you poor dear," she said when the tale was finished. "That wretched uncle of yours, trying to force you into such a marriage, but you are safe now and you are welcome to stay here as long as you need." "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson," Zara said gratefully. "I will work to earn my keep. I do not want to be a burden." "Nonsense," Mrs. Thompson said firmly. "But if you want to help around the boarding house, I certainly will not refuse. I could use an extra pair of hands." Wade stood, placing his hat back on his head. "I should be going. I need to report back to the ranch." Zara felt a sudden panic at the thought of him leaving. She stood quickly, her hand reaching out to catch his arm. "Wait, I never properly thanked you." "You have thanked me plenty," Wade said, but his eyes were soft as he looked down at her. "No, I have not," Zara insisted. "You saved my life, Wade. I do not know how I can ever repay you." "You do not need to repay me," Wade said. "Just promise me you will be more careful in the future." "I promise," Zara said, and she realized her hand was still on his arm. She could feel the warmth of his skin through the fabric of his shirt, the solid strength of him. Mrs. Thompson cleared her throat delicately. "Mr. Dockery, perhaps you would like to stay for supper." "It is the least I can do, and it would give you a chance to rest before your journey back." Wade hesitated, his eyes flicking to Zara. "I do not want to impose." "It is no imposition," Mrs. Thompson said firmly. "I insist." "Then I accept with gratitude," Wade said, and Zara felt her heart lift. Mrs. Thompson showed Zara to a room on the second floor, a charming space with a large bed, a wardrobe, and a window that overlooked the street. "This will be your room for as long as you want it," she said. "There is fresh water in the pitcher, and I will bring up some clothes that might fit you. We can get you properly outfitted in town tomorrow." "Mrs. Thompson, you are too kind," Zara said, her eyes filling with tears. "Your mother was one of my dearest friends," Mrs. Thompson said, placing a gentle hand on Zara's cheek. "It is my honor to help her daughter. Now, wash up and come down for supper in an hour." Left alone, Zara sank onto the bed and let the tears flow. They were tears of relief, of exhaustion, of grief for all she had lost, but also tears of gratitude and hope for what might come. She had survived. She had made it to Douglas. And she had met a man who had shown her that there were still good people in the world. After washing and changing into the clean dress Mrs. Thompson provided, Zara made her way downstairs. She could hear voices in the dining room and followed the sound to find Wade sitting at a long table, talking with Mrs. Thompson and two other guests, a middle-aged couple who introduced themselves as the Porters. Wade stood when Zara entered, and she saw his eyes widen slightly as he took in her appearance. In the clean dress with her hair brushed and arranged, she looked very different from the desperate, sunburned woman he had found in the desert. "Miss Mitchell," he said, and there was something in his voice that made her blush. Supper was a lively affair. Mrs. Thompson was an excellent cook, and the conversation flowed easily. The Porters were traveling through Douglas on their way to California, and they regaled the table with stories of their adventures. Wade was quieter, but Zara noticed the way his eyes kept finding hers across the table, and each time their gazes met, she felt a flutter in her stomach. After supper, Mrs. Thompson shooed the Porters upstairs and then made herself scarce, claiming she had work to do in the kitchen. Zara suspected it was a deliberate ploy to give her and Wade some privacy, and she was grateful. They walked out onto the porch, where the evening air was cool and pleasant. Zara leaned against the railing and looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "It is beautiful here," she said softly. "It is," Wade agreed, but when Zara glanced at him, he was not looking at the sky. He was looking at her. "When will you leave?" she asked, and she hated the way her voice sounded small and sad. "At first light," Wade replied. "I have already been away from the ranch longer than I should have been." "Will I see you again?" The question was out before Zara could stop herself, and she felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. Wade was quiet for a long moment. "I do not know," he finally said. "My work keeps me moving around a lot. I am not often in Douglas." "Oh," Zara said, trying to hide her disappointment. "Of course." Wade turned to face her fully, and in the lamplight spilling from the windows, his eyes were intense. "Zara, I need to be honest with you. When I found you in the desert yesterday, I thought I was just doing what any decent person would do. But spending time with you, getting to know you, I have come to realize that there is something more here, something I was not expecting." Zara's heart began to pound. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I find myself not wanting to leave," Wade said quietly. "I keep thinking of reasons to stay, excuses to delay my return, and that is not like me. I am a solitary man, Zara. I have been on my own for 5 years, and I have been content with that. But then you came into my life, and suddenly I am not so sure anymore." "I feel it too," Zara whispered. "When you said you were leaving, I felt like something was being torn away from me. I know it is foolish. We barely know each other, but I cannot deny what I feel." Wade reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers intertwining with hers. "It is not foolish. Sometimes things happen fast. Sometimes you just know." "What do we do?" Zara asked, looking up into his eyes. "I do not know," Wade admitted. "I have to go back to the ranch. I have obligations, responsibilities. But maybe I can come back to Douglas in a few weeks when I have some time off. We could see each other then, get to know each other better." "I would like that," Zara said, squeezing his hand. "I would like that very much." Wade lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was old-fashioned and courtly, and it made Zara's heart melt. "Then that is what we will do," he said. "I will come back, Zara. I promise you that." They stood there for a long moment, hands clasped, neither wanting to break the connection. Finally, Wade stepped back with obvious reluctance. "I should let you get some rest," he said. "You have been through an ordeal and you need your sleep. Will you come by in the morning before you leave?" Zara asked. "To say goodbye properly, I will," Wade promised. True to his word, Wade appeared at the boarding house just as dawn was breaking. Zara had been up for an hour, unable to sleep, and she met him on the porch. "I wanted to give you this," Wade said, pressing something into her hand. It was a small leather pouch, and when Zara opened it, she found it full of coins. "Wade, I cannot accept this," she protested immediately. "Yes, you can," Wade said firmly. "You said you did not have much money. This will help you get started, buy some proper clothes, things you need. Consider it a loan if it makes you feel better. You can pay me back when you are on your feet." Zara looked down at the pouch, then back up at Wade. "You are too generous." "I am practical," Wade corrected. "I want to know you are taken care of." He mounted his horse and Zara walked over to stand beside him. He looked down at her and she saw the same reluctance to leave that she felt. "I will come back," he said again. "I promise." "I will be here," Zara replied. Wade nodded, tipped his hat to her, and turned his horse toward the road. Zara watched until he disappeared from sight, then stood there for several minutes more, staring at the empty street. Mrs. Thompson found her there and placed a gentle arm around her shoulders. "He is a good man," she said softly. "He is," Zara agreed, her voice thick with emotion. "And he will come back," Mrs. Thompson said with certainty. "I saw the way he looked at you, dear. That man is already half in love." Over the next 3 weeks, Zara settled into life at the boarding house. She helped Mrs. Thompson with cooking and cleaning, changed linens, and greeted guests. The work was hard but satisfying, and she found she enjoyed the routine and the sense of purpose it gave her. She also began to explore Douglas, venturing out to the shops and getting to know the town. She bought new clothes with the money Wade had given her, practical dresses and a good pair of boots. She visited the livery where Rosie was being boarded and spent time grooming and exercising the mare. But every day she found herself watching the road, hoping to see a familiar figure on horseback, and every day she was disappointed. After 3 weeks with no word from Wade, Zara began to worry. Had he changed his mind? Had something happened to him? Mrs. Thompson tried to reassure her, but as the 4th week began, even she started to look concerned. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon as Zara was hanging laundry in the backyard, she heard Mrs. Thompson call her name. There was something in the tone that made Zara's heart leap, and she dropped the sheet she was holding and ran around to the front of the house. Wade was there, dismounting from his horse, and when he saw Zara, his face lit up with a smile that made her knees weak. "I am sorry I am late," he said as she ran to him. "There was trouble at the ranch and I could not get away." Zara did not care about the reasons. She threw herself into his arms and he caught her, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. When he set her down, they stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. "I thought you were not coming," Zara admitted. "I promised you I would come back," Wade said, his hand still on her waist. "I keep my promises, Zara." Over the next several days, Wade stayed at the boarding house, and he and Zara spent every possible moment together. They walked through Douglas, talking about everything and nothing. They rode out into the countryside, and Wade taught Zara how to read the land, how to spot signs of water and game. They sat on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun set and sharing their dreams for the future. Zara learned that Wade had grown up on his father's ranch in New Mexico, that he had a younger sister who had married and moved to Texas, and that his mother had died giving birth to that sister. He spoke of his loneliness, of the long days and nights on the range with only cattle and sky for company, and Zara understood because she had felt that same loneliness. Wade learned that Zara was educated beyond what was typical for women in the West, that her father had believed in schooling regardless of gender. She could read and write well, do figures, and had a sharp mind for business. She spoke of her love for the land, for animals, and her dream of one day having a ranch of her own. "You would be a fine rancher," Wade told her one evening as they sat on the porch. "You have the knowledge and the determination." "But not the money," Zara pointed out. "Land is expensive, and cattle even more so." "Money can be earned," Wade said. "It takes time, but it can be done." On Wade's last evening before he had to return to the ranch, he asked Zara to take a walk with him. They strolled through the quiet streets of Douglas as dusk settled over the town, and Zara sensed that Wade had something important to say. They stopped in a small park near the church, and Wade turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Zara, I have been doing a lot of thinking," he said, and she could hear the nervousness in his voice. I know we have not known each other for very long, just over a month really, but I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you." Zara's heart began to race. "I feel the same way," she whispered. "I am not a wealthy man," Wade continued. "I have some savings, but not much. My work is hard and often dangerous, but I am honest and I am hardworking, and I would do everything in my power to make you happy." "Wade, what are you saying?" Zara asked, though she thought she knew. Wade dropped to one knee, still holding her hands, and looked up at her with those storm-gray eyes. "I am saying that I love you, Zara Mitchell. I think I have loved you from the moment I saw you giving your horse your last water, putting her needs before your own even when you were dying of thirst yourself. That told me everything I needed to know about your character. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Zara's face as she nodded. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, Wade, I will marry you. I love you too, so very much." Wade stood and pulled her into his arms, and then he kissed her. It was Zara's first real kiss, and it was everything she had dreamed it would be. Gentle but passionate, tender but demanding, and full of promise for the future. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, and Wade rested his forehead against hers. "I have to go back to the ranch tomorrow," he said, "but I will give my notice. It will take me about 2 months to finish out my obligations and get my affairs in order. Can you wait that long?" "I would wait forever for you," Zara said, and she meant it. They walked back to the boarding house hand in hand, and when they told Mrs. Thompson the news, she let out a cry of delight and immediately began planning the wedding. "It will be small," Zara said. "Just a few friends. I do not need anything fancy." "Every bride deserves a beautiful wedding," Mrs. Thompson said firmly. "We have 2 months to prepare." "That is plenty of time." Wade left the next morning, but this time Zara did not feel the same sense of loss. He was coming back. They were going to be married. She had found not just a new life in Douglas, but a new love, a partner who understood her and accepted her for who she was. The next 2 months passed in a flurry of preparation. Mrs. Thompson recruited several of the ladies from church to help with the wedding plans. They sewed Zara a dress of cream-colored silk, simple but elegant, with lace at the collar and cuffs. They planned a small reception to be held at the boarding house, with food and music and dancing. Zara received letters from Wade every week, long missives that told her about his work and his plans for their future. He had been saving money for years, he wrote, and combined with what she had, they could make a down payment on a small piece of land. It would not be much at first, but they could build it up together, slowly creating the ranch she had always dreamed of. Zara read his letters over and over, treasuring each word, and wrote back with equal frequency, telling him about her days and how much she missed him. Finally, the day arrived. It was a crisp October morning in 1883, the sky clear and blue, and Zara woke with butterflies in her stomach. Mrs. Thompson came bustling in with breakfast, chattering about all the last-minute details that needed to be attended to. The wedding was to be held at 2 in the afternoon at the small church, where Mrs. Thompson attended services. Zara spent the morning getting ready with Mrs. Thompson and several other ladies helping her dress and arrange her hair. When she finally looked at herself in the mirror, Zara barely recognized the woman staring back at her. The cream silk dress hugged her figure perfectly, and her dark hair was arranged in an elegant style with small white flowers tucked into the curls. She looked like a bride, she thought with wonder. She looked happy. At the church, Zara stood in the small anteroom, waiting for her cue. She had no father to walk her down the aisle, no family at all, but Mrs. Thompson had offered to stand in, and Zara had accepted gratefully. "Are you ready, dear?" Mrs. Thompson asked, adjusting Zara's veil. "I am," Zara replied, and she realized she had never been more ready for anything in her life. The doors opened, and Zara walked down the aisle on Mrs. Thompson's arm. The church was not full, perhaps 20 people scattered among the pews, but Zara barely noticed them. Her eyes were fixed on Wade, who stood at the altar in a new black suit, his hair neatly combed, looking more handsome than she had ever seen him. When she reached him, he took her hand, and Zara saw that his eyes were bright with emotion. "You are beautiful," he whispered, and she felt her heart swell with love. The ceremony was simple and brief. They exchanged vows, promising to love and honor each other for the rest of their lives, and when the minister pronounced them man and wife, Wade kissed her with such tenderness that Zara felt tears slip down her cheeks. The reception at the boarding house was a joyful affair. There was food and laughter and dancing, and Zara felt surrounded by warmth and friendship. These people were her community now, her new family, and she was grateful beyond words. As the evening wore on, Wade pulled her aside. "I have something to show you," he said, his eyes sparkling with excitement. He led her outside to where a wagon was parked in front of the boarding house. In the back were their belongings, packed and ready to go. "Where are we going?" Zara asked, confused. "To our new home," Wade said. "I found a piece of land about 10 miles outside Douglas. It is not much, just 40 acres with a small cabin, but it has good grazing and a reliable water source. I made the down payment last week. It is ours, Zara, the start of our ranch." Zara stared at him, unable to speak for a moment. Then she threw her arms around his neck and kissed him fiercely. "You did this for me," she said when she finally pulled back. "You made my dream come true." "Our dream," Wade corrected. "This is our future, Zara. We will build it together." They said their goodbyes to Mrs. Thompson and the other guests, with promises to visit soon, and then Wade helped Zara up onto the wagon seat. They drove out of Douglas as the stars began to appear in the sky, and Zara leaned against her husband's shoulder, feeling more content than she had in years. The cabin was small, just 2 rooms, but it was sturdy and well built. Wade had already stocked it with supplies, and there was a good stove for cooking and heating. Outside, there was a small barn for the horses and a corral that needed some repair. "I know it is not much," Wade said as he carried Zara over the threshold, "but we will make it into something special." "It is perfect," Zara said, looking around at the simple furnishings. "It is ours, and that makes it perfect." That night, they lay together in the narrow bed, and Wade held Zara close, his arms wrapped protectively around her. "I still cannot believe you are really my wife," he murmured into her hair. "Believe it," Zara said, turning in his arms to face him. "I am yours, Wade Dockery, for the rest of my life." They made love then, gentle and exploratory, learning each other's bodies and responses. It was awkward at first, as first times often are, but it was also beautiful and full of love. And when they finally fell asleep in each other's arms, Zara felt complete in a way she never had before. The next months were hard work but deeply satisfying. Wade continued to work for the Double Bar Ranch, but on a reduced schedule that allowed him to spend more time at home. Together, he and Zara began to build their ranch. They started with just a few head of cattle, purchasing them with their pooled savings. Zara proved to be every bit as capable as she had claimed, working alongside Wade to repair fences, tend the animals, and improve the property. They worked from dawn until dusk, falling into bed exhausted each night, but they were happy. Zara also began breeding horses, using Rosie as her foundation mare. She had an eye for good conformation and temperament, and soon her horses were gaining a reputation in the area. People began coming to the ranch specifically to look at her stock, and she made her first sale 6 months after they were married. "You are a natural businesswoman," Wade told her proudly as she counted the money from the sale. "I think the horse breeding might become more profitable than the cattle." "We can do both," Zara said. "Diversify. That way, if one market is down, we still have the other." Wade pulled her into his arms and kissed the top of her head. "What did I do to deserve such a smart wife?" "You shared your canteen with a desperate woman and her horse in the desert," Zara said, smiling up at him. "And you changed both our lives forever." Their first year of marriage passed in a blur of hard work and happiness. They made improvements to the cabin, adding a proper kitchen and a loft for sleeping that gave them more space. They built a better barn and expanded the corrals. They bought more cattle and horses, and their small herd grew steadily. They also became part of the community around Douglas. They attended church on Sundays when they could, and Zara became friends with several of the other ranch wives in the area. Wade developed a reputation as a fair and honest man, and people began to seek his advice on livestock and ranching matters. In the spring of their second year of marriage, Zara began to feel unwell. She was tired all the time, and certain smells made her nauseous. Mrs. Thompson, who visited regularly, took one look at her and smiled knowingly. "My dear, I believe you are expecting a baby," she said. Zara's hand went to her stomach, her eyes widening. "Do you really think so?" "I am quite certain," Mrs. Thompson said. "All the signs are there." When Zara told Wade that evening, he swept her up in his arms and spun her around, laughing with joy. "We are going to be parents," he said, his voice full of wonder. "Zara, this is the happiest day of my life." "Even happier than our wedding day," Zara teased. "Just as happy," Wade amended, "but in a different way." As Zara's pregnancy progressed, Wade became almost comically protective. He insisted she not work too hard, that she rest frequently, and that she eat plenty of good food. Zara found his concern both touching and occasionally frustrating, as she was perfectly capable of continuing her normal activities for several more months. "I am pregnant, not ill," she told him when he tried to prevent her from helping with the horses. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, Wade. I will be fine." But she could not deny that she appreciated his care and concern. He made sure she was comfortable, rubbed her feet when they swelled, and held her when she cried for no reason at all, a victim of the strange emotional swings that pregnancy brought. In late November of 1884, their son was born. It was a long labor with Mrs. Thompson and the local midwife in attendance, and Wade wore a path in the cabin floor with his pacing. But when he finally heard the baby's first cry, he rushed into the bedroom to find Zara exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. "It is a boy," she said, smiling up at him through her tears. "We have a son, Wade." Wade knelt beside the bed and looked down at his son with awe. The baby had a shock of dark hair and a red, wrinkled face, and he was the most beautiful thing Wade had ever seen. "What should we name him?" he asked, gently touching one tiny hand with his finger. The baby's fingers wrapped around his, and Wade felt his heart melt completely. "I was thinking William," Zara said, "after your father, William Joseph Dockery." "That is perfect," Wade said, his voice thick with emotion. "Hello, William. Welcome to the world, son." The next months were exhausting in a whole new way. William was a healthy baby but demanding, as all babies are, and Zara found herself functioning on very little sleep. But watching Wade with their son made it all worthwhile. He was a natural father, gentle and patient, and he sang to William in a low, rumbling voice that always soothed the baby's cries. As William grew, the ranch continued to grow as well. By their 5th anniversary, they had expanded their holdings to 80 acres and had a decent-sized herd of cattle and a growing reputation for quality horses. They had hired a young cowhand named Jesse to help with the work, giving Wade and Zara a bit more time to focus on their family. William was a bright, energetic child who toddled after his father everywhere, wanting to help with the chores even though he was far too small. Wade was endlessly patient with him, teaching him about the animals and the land, and Zara often stood on the porch watching them together, her heart full. In the spring of 1887, Zara discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and she continued working almost up until the day she went into labor. In September, they welcomed a daughter, whom they named Sarah after Zara's mother. Sarah was a placid baby, content to lie in her cradle and watch the world with wide, curious eyes. William was fascinated by his new sister and wanted to hold her constantly, though at 3 years old, he had to be carefully supervised. Life on the ranch fell into a comfortable rhythm. The children grew, the business prospered, and Wade and Zara's love for each other only deepened with time. They had their challenges, of course. There were droughts that killed grass and made water scarce. There were harsh winters that tested their endurance. There were moments of fear when one of the children was sick, or when a cattle sale fell through. But through it all, they had each other. On difficult days, Wade would pull Zara into his arms and remind her of the day they met, when she was giving her horse her last water and he shared his canteen with them both. "We have survived worse," he would say. "We can survive anything." And they did. 10 years after their wedding, they celebrated their anniversary by taking the children on a picnic to the spot where Wade had first brought Zara after they left Douglas. The small cabin had been expanded into a comfortable house with 4 bedrooms, a large kitchen, and a parlor. The barn was bigger and better, and their corrals held some of the finest horses in southern Arizona. William, now 9, was already proving to be a skilled horseman, and Sarah, at 6, showed signs of inheriting her mother's talent with animals. They also had a third child now, a son named Jacob, who was 2 and full of mischief. As they sat under a large cottonwood tree watching the children play, Wade took Zara's hand. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Leaving Tombstone, nearly dying in the desert, all of it." Zara looked at him in surprise. "Regret it? Wade, meeting you was the best thing that ever happened to me. This life we have built together, our children, our ranch, all of it is more than I ever dreamed possible." "Even on the hard days," Wade pressed. "Especially on the hard days," Zara said. "Because on those days, I remember that I have you beside me. We face everything together, and that makes all the difference." Wade lifted her hand to his lips, just as he had done that first night on Mrs. Thompson's porch. "I love you, Zara Dockery. More today than the day I married you, and I will love you even more tomorrow." "And I love you," Zara replied. "My cowboy who shared his canteen. You saved more than my life that day, Wade. You gave me a future I never thought I could have." As they sat there, watching their children play in the fading afternoon light, Zara reflected on the strange turns life could take. 5 years ago, she had been a desperate young woman giving her horse her last water, certain she was going to die in the Arizona desert. And now she was a wife, a mother, and a successful rancher, living the dream she had thought was impossible. The years continued to pass, bringing both joy and sorrow. Mrs. Thompson passed away peacefully in her sleep when William was 12, and both Wade and Zara mourned the loss of the woman who had been such a blessing in their lives. They traveled to Douglas for the funeral and were touched by how many people came to pay their respects to the kind woman who had helped so many. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. William proved to have a talent for working with cattle that rivaled his father's skill, while Sarah's way with horses was almost magical. Jacob, as he grew, showed an interest in the business side of ranching, keeping meticulous records and always knowing exactly how much each head of cattle or horse was worth. When William turned 18, Wade officially made him a partner in the ranch. Sarah, now 15, had already established herself as the ranch's head horse trainer, a position she held with pride and skill. And Jacob, at 13, was managing the ranch's books and accounts with an efficiency that impressed even the bank managers in Douglas. "We have built something remarkable," Wade said to Zara one evening as they sat on their porch, watching the sun set over their land. They were both in their mid-40s now, their hair showing touches of gray, but their love for each other had not diminished in the slightest. "We have," Zara agreed, leaning her head on his shoulder. "And it will continue long after we are gone. Our children will carry it on and their children after them." "Do you remember," Wade said, a smile in his voice, "that first day, when I found you in the desert? How could I forget?" Zara replied, "I was certain I was going to die, and then you appeared like an answer to a prayer I had not even had the strength to speak." "You were giving Rosie your last water," Wade said. "That is what I remember most clearly. You were dying of thirst and you were still putting your horse first. That is when I knew." "Knew what?" Zara asked, turning to look at him. "That you were someone special," Wade said simply. "Someone worth saving, someone worth loving." Zara felt tears prick her eyes. Even after all these years, he could still move her with his words. "You saved me in more ways than one that day, Wade Dockery." "And you saved me right back," Wade replied, kissing her softly. "I was half alive before I met you, just going through the motions. You brought me back to life, Zara. You gave me purpose and meaning and a family. You gave me everything." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they sat together in comfortable silence, hands clasped, watching their children move around the ranch. William was checking on the horses in the barn. Sarah was playing with Jacob near the corral, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. More years passed. William married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring spread, a practical young woman named Catherine who fit seamlessly into the family. They built a house on the far edge of the property and soon welcomed their own children, giving Wade and Zara their first grandchildren. Sarah surprised everyone by falling in love with a young veterinarian who came to the ranch to treat a sick horse. His name was Daniel, and though he was a city boy from Tucson, he adapted to ranch life with remarkable ease, drawn by his love for Sarah and his passion for animals. They married and had 3 children in quick succession, filling the ranch with even more noise and laughter. Jacob, true to form, approached marriage with the same careful planning he brought to everything else. He courted a schoolteacher from Douglas for 2 years before proposing, and their wedding was a grand affair that brought together friends and family from across Arizona and New Mexico. He and his wife Elizabeth built a house in Douglas, where they could be close to the business contacts Jacob had cultivated over the years, but they visited the ranch every Sunday for family dinner. As Wade and Zara moved into their 60s, they gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operation of the ranch, letting their children take over. But they still lived in the house they had built together, still walked the land they loved, and still sat on the porch every evening, watching the sun set. "We have been blessed," Zara said one evening, surrounded by the happy chaos of grandchildren running around the yard. "More blessed than I ever thought possible. We made our own blessings," Wade replied, pulling her close. "With hard work and determination and love, lots and lots of love." On their 30th wedding anniversary, the entire family gathered for a massive celebration. There were more than 40 people present, including children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren from William's oldest daughter, who had married young. Tables were set up in the yard, groaning under the weight of food, and there was music and dancing and laughter. As Wade and Zara stood together, watching their enormous family celebrate, William called for everyone's attention. "I would like to propose a toast," he said, raising his glass. "To my parents, Wade and Zara Dockery. 30 years ago, they took a chance on each other and on a dream. They built this ranch from almost nothing, through drought and hardship and hard work. But more importantly, they built a family. They taught us the value of honesty, of perseverance, and of love. Everything we are, everything we have, we owe to them. To Wade and Zara, to Wade and Zara." Everyone echoed, raising their glasses. Zara felt tears streaming down her face, and Wade's arm tightened around her waist. "We did all right, did we not?" he murmured in her ear. "We did better than all right," Zara replied. "We did magnificently." As the celebration continued into the night, Zara found a quiet moment to slip away to the barn. She walked down the row of stalls until she came to the last one, where an old chestnut mare stood dozing. Rosie was ancient now, nearly 30 years old, and she had been retired from work years ago. But Zara made sure she was well cared for, visiting her every day. "Hello, old girl," Zara said softly, stroking the mare's soft nose. "Do you remember that day in the desert, the day I gave you my last water? I thought we were both going to die out there. But then Wade found us, and he shared his canteen with us both, and everything changed." Rosie whickered softly, as if she understood, and Zara smiled through her tears. "You were there at the beginning, girl. You are part of our story, too." She felt rather than heard Wade come up behind her, and his arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "I wondered where you had gone," he said. "I wanted to see Rosie," Zara explained. "To remember." "We have a lot of good memories," Wade said. "A lifetime of them." "And we are not done making them yet," Zara said firmly, turning in his arms to face him. "We still have years ahead of us, Wade Dockery." "Then let us make every one of them count," Wade said, and he kissed her with all the passion and tenderness that had marked their 30 years together. They walked back to the party hand in hand, and as they rejoined their family, Zara felt a profound sense of gratitude. She thought of the frightened, desperate young woman she had been, kneeling in the desert dust, giving her horse the last drops of water. She thought of the cowboy who had appeared like a miracle, sharing his canteen and his future with them both. That moment had changed everything. It had been the beginning of a love story that had spanned 3 decades and counting. A love story that had built a family and a legacy that would endure for generations. As the music played and her grandchildren danced and her children laughed together, Zara looked up at Wade and saw her entire world reflected in his eyes. He smiled at her, that slow, warm smile that still made her heart flutter after all these years, and she smiled back. They had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, in the brutal heat of the Arizona desert, when both their lives were at a crossroads. And from that moment of desperation and kindness, they had built something beautiful and lasting. Zara leaned her head against Wade's shoulder and whispered, "Thank you for sharing your canteen that day." "Thank you for giving your horse your last water," Wade replied. "It told me everything I needed to know about your heart. And I knew in that moment that I wanted to spend the rest of my life loving you." "And have you?" Zara asked, though she already knew the answer. "Every single day," Wade confirmed, "and I will continue to love you every day for the rest of my life and beyond." As the stars wheeled overhead and the celebration continued around them, Wade and Zara stood together. 2 souls who had found each other against all odds and had built a life beyond their wildest dreams. The ranch that had started with nothing but hope and determination now sprawled across hundreds of acres, home to 3 generations of the Dockery family. But none of it would have been possible without that single act of kindness in the desert, when a cowboy shared his canteen with a desperate woman and her horse, and in doing so, shared his heart and his future as well. Years later, when Wade and Zara were in their 70s, they still sat on that same porch every evening, watching the sun set over their land. Their hair was white now, their faces lined with age, but their hands still found each other automatically, fingers intertwining with the ease of decades of practice. "You ever wonder how different our lives would have been if I had ridden a different direction that day?" Wade asked one evening. "If I had not found you in the desert, I do not like to think about it," Zara admitted, "because I cannot imagine a life without you, Wade. You are woven into every part of who I am." "And you are my heart," Wade said simply. "You always have been from that very first moment." They sat in silence for a while, content in each other's company, watching as the sky turned from gold to pink to purple. In the distance, they could hear their great-grandchildren playing, the sounds of their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. "We built something good here," Zara said. "Something that will last." "We did," Wade agreed. "And it all started with a canteen of water and two people who were brave enough to take a chance on love." As the last light faded from the sky and the stars began to appear, Wade and Zara rose from their chairs and walked into their house, arms around each other, still as in love as they had been on the day they married. Their story, which had begun with such desperation and danger, had become a testament to the power of kindness, the strength of love, and the beauty of two lives joined together in partnership and devotion. And though they did not know it then, their legacy would continue for generations, a reminder that even in the harshest circumstances, compassion and love could bloom and flourish, creating something far more valuable than land or cattle or money. They had created a family, a dynasty, and a love story for the ages. And it had all started with a cowboy, a woman, a horse, and a shared canteen in the unforgiving Arizona desert.